Come on a journey with a cinephile.
Wake up, sucker. We're thieves and we're bad guys. That's exactly what we are.
We was getting too big for our britches.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
What have you done to its eyes?
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Pretty well, little brother. Pretty well.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 295. I'm your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. And this episode here for you, I'm going to be doing something I've done a little bit differently from years past, as I'm just going to recap my top horror films from 1925. I've compiled enough of a list where I can make more of like a top list where it's not just like one or two or like three films or whatever. So that's going to be the feature that I'm doing here, is I'm going to run through all the ones that I've watched from 1925. And then for mini reviews here, my Voyage to the Fives rewatch is Village of the Damned. This is the John Carpenter one from 1995. And then I have a slew of screeners here from the Rain Dance Film Festival of Shaman, Loner, Saturnalia, The Invisible Half, and then I also have a rewatch here for a 2025 film just to kind of keep up on that of Dark Match. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me. Let me get you over to a quick break before I get into those mini reviews.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And I have a great offer here that I wanted to go ahead and extend to all you listeners out there for oldglory.com. This is a place where you can get over 300,000 items for music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture fans, featuring officially licensed merch from iconic bands and top sports teams. Discover your perfect fan gear and save with my exclusive discount. And that is going to be Cinephile 1. But here you get a 15% discount off of any product, and this is exclusive for something that I'm doing and for what has been offered to me. And I mean, this has things like artists here, Bob Marley, the Beatles, Grateful Dead, the Rolling Stones, Metallica, and more. We also have sports fans have stuff here for your favorite teams with official gear from the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA, showcasing your team pride in style. And they even have some stuff here that celebrate, entertainment, TV shows, movies, lifestyle brands, and it means some quirky gifts to fan favorite apparel. There's something for everybody. With free standard shipping and same day order processing, Old Glory delivers fast and reliable service with every purchase. Whether shopping for yourself or looking for a perfect gift, Old Glory is your one-stop shop for iconic, high-quality merch that reflects your love for music and sports, as well as like pop culture. And I mean, kind of just running through some of this stuff. This is a family-owned superstore since 1969. They're known for their quality and customer service. You can get exclusive selection of graphic tees, hoodies, hats, and accessories. Represent your favorite sports team with official fan gear. Discover quirky gifts, like I was saying, and fun pop culture apparel. Perfect place to shop for, this type of stuff. And there's a vast selection of entertainment-themed products, including movies and TV shows if you're not necessarily into some of the other things. And enjoy reliable and fast service with Old Glory's commitment to customer satisfaction, the ultimate source for high-quality, licensed fan merchandise for all ages. Like I said, my promo code is going to be Cinephile1, all one word. So if you're kind of interested, go ahead and check out their website here in my show notes, as I'll have I actually have more details down there for you as well. And for my first mini review here is going to be Village of the Damned from 1995. This is directed by John Carpenter. It was written by David Himmelstein, and then there's also given credit here. I know there's a novel, and then they're giving credit as well to the people that wrote the original version, because this is a remake. This looks like John Wyndham wrote The Midwich Cuckoos, that's the book, and then the original screenplay was written between Sterling Silliphant and Wolf Rilla, and then Ronald Kinnock did some additional work there as George Barclay. And then there's some also uncredited work here by Steven Seibert and Larry Sulkus. This is starring Christopher Reeve, Christy Alley, and Linda Kozłowski. Actually, somebody else I wanted to include here is that we have Michael Parry, Mark Hamill, Meredith Salinger. There's also Peter Jason and a very young Thomas Dekker in this one. He's an actor that I've seen as an adult. But this is a horror sci-fi thriller film that is from the United States. Also, some other subgenres here is alien invasion and supernatural horror. This is currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis here being: a small town's women give birth to unfriendly alien children posing as human. So it kind of goes a little bit into spoilers there, but I mean, if you know this story, it's kind of pretty obvious very early on. But I remember watching this when it hit the movie channels. I would have been living out in the country by then, and we had the movie channels on DirecTV. I think I've only seen it that one time all the way through. Now, I've seen scenes here and there. I picked this up on DVD years ago, and finally found the time to check it out. So this would be my Voyage to the Fives rewatch for 1995 for this episode here, if you couldn't tell. So how we'll start is that I did see this before watching the original 1960 version, and when I realized that it was based on a novel while watching that other version, like the original version, I love that it's a Midwich Cuckoos. What is great here is knowing that a cuckoo bird will lay its egg in the nest of another, and then this baby is usually bigger when the real babies of that bird, and it'll push out its rivals to be raised by the mother bird. Makes for an interesting concept here if you correlate it towards humans. Now that set up, what struck me here was that Carpenter is tackling this remake. The original was good. His take on the thing is better than that original one. So this one, I don't know if it does much better outside of just kind of updating the take on it. There's more technology that's made available, and we can also go a little bit more brutal with the effects. Now, Barbara, who is actually the wife to the Dr. Alan Shaffey, who is Reeve, and that wife is going to be Barbara, portrayed by Karen Kahn. What I like here is that she accidentally gives her daughter, Mara, some soup that's too hot. Now, she is forced to punish herself in a horrific way, burning herself as well, but there's a heavy theme here of children supposed to, bring joy. Fearing them adds another layer, and what they do with these things without emotion, which contributes to that terror as well. So let's shift over here then to talking about these kids a little bit more. Now, David is the youngest, and he is portrayed by Dekker, and he is sad because the stillborn baby of their group is supposed to be his mate. This gives an opening for his mother of Jill to help try to develop compassion. Now, she is portrayed by Kozłowski. It puts him at the other end with his team, though, and Mara is their leader, and she is actually the daughter to Alan and Barbara, and she is portrayed here by Lindsay Hahn. Now, this causes her and the rest of her people here to kind of scold David in this process. There's something here about doing what's good for the greater good, which is the case for the survival of this group of children. Now, he also could show empathy towards his mother, who loves him very much. There is a projection there as well, as she wants to believe that part of her husband who died when everybody fell asleep in this town and then everybody kind of happened, and he is portrayed by Parry. She wants to believe that Frank is inside of David. Now, she did carry him to term, so I will say that there is a connection that gets made there. Outside of that, this idea is problematic. The idea of needing to kill children to survive, which is supposed to be innocent, is something else to kind of consider here as well. And what I mean here is that children are supposed to be innocent, so it makes it kind of more difficult, and I like how they're kind of playing with that idea. Then let's look at this group of children as a group. This is playing with a similar idea you get with like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Instead of taking over people, we have these alien life forms impregnating the women. Now, this is a form of rape since they didn't have consent to take over their bodies. They have a terrible power that could jeopardize humanity. They are the other, which is also scary for people. It is a terrifying power to force others to kind of harm themselves against their will. I do appreciate exploring this, especially going back to the cuckoo reference. We're also seeing that they're inherently evil in the eyes of humans, not from their point of view. Now, there's one last thing here I want to explore is Alan is tasked with trying to teach the children later because the other students are getting uncomfortable around them, so they're elementary age. There's a good reason there. Since they can read his mind, he figures out a way to clear it and block them from his thoughts. This is also one of the more iconic sequences in the original. I like what they do here as it builds tension to the climax. I'll credit Reeve here as I thought his portrayal as our lead was solid. I think let's go over just to talk about the rest of the acting performance. I already said what I thought, that Reeve worked. He doesn't show a lot of emotions, but he's still, it's fine. Allie is solid as this borderline devious scientist. Dr. Susan Werner. I still wonder if she killed Melanie's baby and she is portrayed by Salinger, or if that baby was actually stillborn. I like the ambiguity to make it darker, both for Melanie and what she does, as well as done to that child. Kozlowski is one of the better performances. Jill, I feel bad for her for what happens with Pari. Salinger, Hamill, and then I also give credit here to Pippa Pear 3, Jason, and then there is some other people here. I wanted to make sure I get all these parents' names. Constance Forsland, Khan, and then the rest of the parents, like I said, were fine. I actually thought that Han and the rest of the children were good in their roles. It also works better since they're supposed to be emotionless. Their frustration with Alan adds to it. Decker was adorable as his little boy who might have a chance at humanity. I thought the rest of the cast were fine to round this off for what was needed, including we have cameos here by George Buckflower, who is a Carpenter regular. Carpenter makes a brief appearance, and Seth Meyers does as well. Also, done to be filmmaking, I'd say that this is probably the best part of the film. Cinematography is good. I love capturing the isolation and the beauty of where this is set. Framing was good there. We are limited on the effects used. It also doesn't necessarily need them. The glowing eyes when the children are using their power works. I do love the climax when they are going full power, seeing what their true face is. This does go a little bit more brutally, which is good to help set it apart. I did see that K and B's names in the credits, so they did the effects, so that helps with the truth when we see what the actual stillborn looks like. Other than that, we have the classic Carpenter vibe to the soundtrack. It does feel like stock for him, though. So in conclusion, I don't think this is a great remake. It is still made well enough. The cinematography, framing, and effects leading the way. This is a story that is ripe, much like Invasion of the Body Snatchers periodically. Especially, I think this one kind of has vibes of like the Cold War. There's something terrifying about making children into the villains, even though we know the truth. There's this loss of innocence and inherent evil to consider. The acting here is solid. Reeve was fine. Allie, Kozlowski, Han, and Decker lead the way for me. It doesn't do much to set itself apart from the original, just some minor tweaks for being made 35 years later. Carpenter is still competent in his abilities, though, so consider that. So my rating here for Village of the Damned, the version from 1995, is going to be a 6.5 out of 10. Then up next, I got to watch Shaman. This is from 2025. It was directed by Antonio Negrete, and then it was written by Daniel Negrete. This stars Daniel Gillies, Sarah Canning, and Jack Klein. This is a horror film that is a co-production between the United States and Ecuador. It is currently sitting, actually, because it's not official, it's listed as completed, but it is not open yet for ratings yet on IMDb. And there hasn't been enough ratings to do an average over on Letterboxd. So the synopsis: a missionary converting an indigenous community near a remote Ecuadorian volcano must come to terms with her own faith when her son is possessed by dark forces. So I'll go ahead and just kind of introduce people. We have Candace, who's our main character. She is portrayed by Canning. Then her husband is Joel, portrayed by Gillies, and their son is Elliot, portrayed by Klein. So this is a film that I learned about thanks to Rain Dance Film Festival, where it showed for its European premiere. I saw this horror film that was available via screener, so I requested it. The title seemed intriguing since I'm usually interested in folk horror, and I kind of figured that's where this might go. And it would kind of fall in that vein, was what I thought. And this is also a horror film from Ecuador, being a country of origin this is the first one from there I've seen. So other than that, I came into seeing this one blind. So where I'm going to start then is that this ticks a lot of boxes for me. We have folk horror where we're exploring pagan ideas. Now we're doing this with people though who are Christians. Not only are they devout, they are also missionaries, so they're out spreading the word of Jesus. When things get tense, we see the true nature of people, and that's something I love exploring. Now that that's set up, let's look at our main family here. Candace is wanting to put a good facade up. She is annoyed that Elliot is showing his phone to local children, especially a violent video game. I get the idea that she's trying to exude that they're like perfect. My problem there is Elliot more than likely didn't sign up for this. He's a young teen, so he doesn't have much of a say. He's also being held to a standard that is difficult to. Now, when he's late for his confirmation, this bothers Candace. She even tells a harmless lie. What I like here is that there is somebody that we saw in the very beginning who is getting baptized in the local river of Rosa, and she is portrayed by Mercy Lemma, that she knows what is being said isn't true. It makes her question her faith. There are then these like rituals that the Christians need to do to make me see parallels to the indigenous faiths, because we often kind of see them doing different things in order to help Elliot. Now, we have another interesting aspect here is that Candace is blaming the shaman for what happened to Elliot. She is convinced they did something to him, or like they fed him something. In reality, they know that there is this evil presence that was in this nearby cave that Elliot went into, and they know what's possessing him, and they're trying to help. Joel thinks this too, and he doesn't fully believe in their rituals, but he doesn't want to. It's kind of hard to say here because he's fine that they are not following everything that he believes in. He does think it's harmless though. So when Candace lashes out at him, bringing up his former addiction, as a parent, I get it. If something happened to either of my children, I would do whatever it took to help them. That includes following a religion, pagan or organized. Her anger is misguided, but it tends to be when you're in the situation. And I mean, when things get tense, my wife and I can sometimes snap at each other too. Let's then shift over to filmmaking. I thought that this had some good cinematography. They do well in capturing where this is set. I love the background of this volcano. That comes into play for a nightmare. I also like capturing this remote village where it's set. My problem though is that it comes with the possession aspect. There are many films that have come out before this, so it kind of just feels generic and falls in lines with a lot of them. But I do like having this localized shaman in their religion, which features guinea pigs. I thought that was good. This sets it apart. It's just that the possession itself kind of feels like things I've seen. There's CGI here that doesn't hold up as well. There's some unsettling things with the atmosphere. That was aided by the sound design. The jump scares were effective at times as well. So all that's left then would be the acting performances. I thought that our core family was good. Gillies as his father that loves his wife and son. He takes a backseat to his wife, though, who is our main character. Canyon is solid here as Candace. What I like for her is that she sets up things to happen later. Like asking about what the watch that belonged to his grandfather that Elliot is looking for because he lost it in that cave, and then he becomes possessed. She also does certain things for her appearance that cause issues later. I like that as well. Klein works as this possessed teen. And then I'll also give credit here to Alejandro Fajardo, Lemma, and then there is also Lisandro Morales and the rest of the cast around them for what was needed. I do like Father Meyer. He's portrayed by Fajardo. I like that he fails in helping Elliot, showing that this evil is older than his religion and has no power over it. That was a good route to go. So in conclusion, I rather enjoyed this different take on the possession film. We have elements of folklore that I love, then the duality of Christianity versus pagan beliefs. There's an interesting element there as seeing things that are similar while having, both rituals and comparing it to what is different. The acting was good. Canyon leads the way. I love how she needs to come to terms with her issues in order to save her son. This is made well. The cinematography, framing, and sound design leading the way. I don't love the CGI. It also doesn't ruin it. I understand there's not a whole lot of ways you could do it outside of that probably, but the possession sequences do feel generic, unfortunately. It doesn't ruin it. I just don't think it holds up either. I'd still recommend this one if you like things that I laid out here. So my rating for Shaman, though, going to be a 7 out of 10. Then up next we have here is Loner. This is, actually I believe it got its world premiere here at Raindance Film Festival, so this is from 2025. It was directed by Charlie Robb, who co-directed this with Douglas Twain, something like that. And then Rob also wrote this. He also stars in this with Kat Johns Burke and Jessica Summer. This doesn't have any ratings or anything like that, but it's from the United Kingdom, is the country of production. And over on Letterboxd, I would say this is hovering between like a 2.5 to a 5-star movie over there. I'm going to leave that where it is, but the synopsis: an inspiring vlogger goes on a wilderness retreat to a cabin in the woods where he is held captive by an ancient natural force. So this one I got to see, once again, thanks to Raindance Film Festival via screener. Now, what I knew coming in with that was horror, had a cool poster, and then seeing this with 2025 release is another one that I could add for my list of independent films when I'm getting to do my end-of-year list. So where I'll end up starting then is that this is an interesting character study of Angus portrayed by Rob. Now, it starts like the synopsis says. He's an aspiring vlogger. I get the idea that life got stagnant or he just wanted to try this out. So he's following the footsteps of people who have done this before. So there's that copycat feel. What's great, though, is that he hasn't really practiced any of his survival skills, and he's not necessarily good at them either. And that's where the dark elements creep in. So then, sticking with Angus, what pushed him to actually come out here and do this is tragic. I believe it was his girlfriend, or if it's not, it's somebody he wanted to be with. She was killed and he's struggling. I would too. It feels like he's trying to make the best out of life and not waste any more time. But there's an element here, though, that being alone with your thoughts drive you deeper into depression as well as into insanity. So then he actually passes across another character when he's hiking out to this cabin, and she is Eve, and she is portrayed by Johns Burke, is that she comes to his cabin in the middle of the night, one of these nights, and asks for help. He panics and then shuts down and doesn't let her in. Now, part of this could be coming from living in the city. We are more distrustful. I do think that Rob is good in this role. Something I haven't even brought up is that he makes the character likable. He's funny in some of the things that he says and tries to do. So when things start to look bleak, we feel something for him, which is good. Now let's head over to talking about where this is set. In the middle of the woods can be terrifying. He can't easily get away. He's also traveling alone, so if something happens to him, he might not be found for a little while. And then there's also this potential that something supernatural could be going on around him. He tries to leave and get back to his car, and he ends up back at a certain spot, and it comes back to the cabin. So it could be that he's got turned around in the woods because they can be disorienting and he's not the most, equipped. It could be something weird is happening, that he writes a note on a drone and tries to fly it out. It gets to a certain place and then malfunctions and then crashes. Coupling this with the sounds that he is hearing when he is recording like the sounds of the woods, it makes you think that something supernatural could be going on. It doesn't help that he finds this book that Eve had in her bag where things are lining up with this entity that could be living in these woods. That almost gives a folk horror vibe. There's a logical explanation for these things, but I love at least allowing us to come to our own conclusions. The ending is interesting because it kind of leans and explains something, at least partially, into what is happening here. What I think also makes this effective is the filmmaking. Cinematography and framing to capture the woods are great. It feels like we're in the middle of nowhere. That helps to build an atmosphere. I'll also credit the sound design. The nature sounds are so real that incorporated in these other things that we don't know if they're truly hearing them or not adds to it. That's also unnerving. Now, this is limited in the effects used, but also doesn't necessarily need them. There are moments where Angus gets hurt and it looks real, including he steps on the head of an arrow in his foot, and that made me cringe. Something we have... I'll also kind of just finish out here saying we have a limited cast. It's mostly just kind of featuring Rob. I'll just briefly say that Johns Burke is solid. She shows good terror the night that she's looking for help. She does become this specter that Angus is looking for. I do think the other characters work in their very minor stuff to kind of push our lead to where he ends up. So in conclusion, this is an interesting little found footage film. It definitely feels inspired by the Blair Witch Project and the lore that gets developed in that series as it goes on. This is a character study of our lead of Angus. He makes a tough decision one night, and then we see him descend into madness from grief, isolation, and guilt. I do like that there's this potential supernatural angle here. Rob's performance as a lead was good. The rest of the cast kind of push him to where he ends up. This is made well with the cinematography, framing, and sound design. A bit of a slower burn, so keep that in mind ahead of seeing this, but I rather enjoyed my time here and would recommend giving this a watch. So my rating here for Loner is going to be a 7.5 out of 10. Then I have Saturnalia. I think it might be how you say this one, but it's from 2025. This is directed by Daniel John Lurch, who also co-wrote this with Julia Nilsson and Daryl Zawarka Workman. This stars Sophia Anthony Velvet, and that's Sophia Anthony Velvet and Dante Blake. This is a horror thriller film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a... Actually, not enough rating. There's not enough people who have rated it yet on IMDb to have an average. And then I would say over on Letterboxd is about a 3.5 to a 4-star movie over there, with our synopsis being: a newcomer to a prestigious boarding school comes to realize the institution and its cruel head mistress are a front for something much eviler amid the disappearance of students. So it intrigued me when I held the title. Now I was able to get the screener once again for Rain Dance Film Festival, where it made its world premiere. The poster caught my attention. It wasn't until after the fact that I realized this was inspired by Italian gialli films from the 1970s, and that Claudio Simonetti did the composing. Noted this was a 2025 horror release was something that interests me, once again, as I was saying, to give me more of that independent film exposure. So where I'm going to end up jumping in here is that, let me bring up our writing team again of Lurch, Nilsson, and Workman. They had to be influenced by Suspiria. I put that in my notes, and it wasn't until settling in that I realized that this was inspired by gialli, that they even went as far to get Simonetti of Goblin fame to do the soundtrack. Another element here is that this borrowed would be for the character of Miriam, who's our lead, portrayed by Anthony. Coming to a boarding school like this feels like Phenomena. Now, the setting and a lot of just how the story plays out feels like Suspiria. Now that I have it set up, let's delve into what we're getting here. We have an interesting enough mystery set in an odd school. It's ornate and large. Let me also kind of just interject here. I don't think Suspiria is a gialli, but it definitely has elements of the filmmaking style. So getting back to this school, though, there's almost a surreal fairy tale feel to it, and that's where Suspiria also kind of comes in. I also get vibes here from like the film Would You Rather. They aren't playing a game, but the punishments that are handed down aren't necessarily to you, and it kind of makes these characters question what they're doing if they want to keep punishing their fellow classmates, because this drives a divide. Hannah was tasked with Miriam to make sure that she shows up to her fitting on time. Now, the former gets punished for the latter teen being late. And then Hannah is her roommate, portrayed by Amaraya Dion. Now, it is playing on humanity, with Miriam getting these large meals because she misses a meal, and then the head mistress, who is Miss Hemlock, portrayed by Velvet, she ends up punishing her by giving her these large meals, and nobody else of these other students are getting food, so it turns them against her, and they're being divided. This is what will lead to my next point, though. The title here is an interesting one. I had to look this up when crafting my review to learn that this is an ancient Roman festival honoring the god Saturn. This is Kronos in Greece. He is the father. He's a titan, father to the gods. There's a good touch here that the wallpaper in Miriam and Hannah's room has the planet Saturn on it. When they're in the classroom, they're learning about mythology. I believe the first time is learning about like Saturn eating his children to prevent them from rising up, and how a stone was given to him instead of Zeus. There's an interesting duality to the punishments handed out. If the students banded together, they could rise up to defeat the headmistress, who is torturing them. Instead, they're bickering amongst themselves. And there's also an interesting reveal late that I wasn't expecting, so credit there. Now, sticking with the inspiration, let's go over to filmmaking. The cinematography and framing are good. The lighting is also Giallo-inspired. There are vivid red lights that are used, which was an interesting choice. Miriam continues to have these dreams and visions that are surreal. I don't mind it since they do look so good. I thought that whoever was doing the lighting, that was where they were working on their best stuff. The other times, it felt like they wanted the fans to notice. Moving to the effects, I thought they were fine. They were limited but looked good, and they were mostly done practical. The opening kill is a direct homage to Suspiria. I'll just kind of say there is to kind of think of that opening of that movie. That was bloody and a good variation on it. Let's also bring back Simonetti. This wasn't his best work, but it was still solid. Let's then finish out with the acting performances. I don't think it's great, but I don't think they're bad either. Anthony is a little bit too abrasive. What is great here, though, is that something happens to her later that breaks it. I can see why she acts the way that she does. I mean, I should also point out here that both of her parents mysteriously died, so there's that. Velvet works as this villainous headmistress. There's a reveal that feels a little bit too heavy-handed that explains a lot. Blake was fine as his RA who was torn between doing the right thing and then, kind of using the privilege that's given to him, and he is portraying Holden Sachs. He actually befriends the Miriam character as well. Dion was solid as his mousy roommate who was bullied. I would also give credit here to Maddie Siepi and Morgan Messina. They're good as these like bullies that are mean girls, but they do humanize Nancy, which I thought worked. The rest of the students were fine, and other cast members to help round this out for what was needed. Inclusion in this film is an interesting one to watch. I do like that Lurch and the writing team wore their inspirations on their sleeve. Suspiria and Dario Argento are the two things that I'm a big fan of. I just don't know if it does enough to stand on its own. I did enjoy the reveal of this odd school. The acting was solid across the board. This is made well enough with the cinematography, framing, lighting, and effects leading the way. They do good things with the lighting, but it feels a bit forced at times. I thought this was an interesting enough watch and would recommend it as a variation on the deadly boarding school films. So my rating here for Saturnalia is going to be a 7 out of 10. Then up next, also from Rain Dance Film Festival, is going to be The Invisible Half. This is from 2025. It was written and directed by Masaki Nishiyama. And then this is starring Lisa Sierra, Miyu Okuno, and Runa Hirasawa. So this is a horror film that is from Japan. This is currently there's not enough ratings yet on IMDb to do an average. And then over on Letterboxd, we're looking at about a 3.5 to a 4-star movie over there, with the synopsis being: Elena, a half-Japanese high school girl, struggles with her identity. While constantly watching, she discovers she's also being watched by something else, a monster that can only be seen through her smartphone and heard through her earphones. So this is the one that I got the chance to see, like I said, from a screener by Rain Dance Film Festival. It made its world premiere there. Now, I tend to just confirm that the movies are in genre, but from there, I did see the poster, caught my interest. This also being from Japan helps to give me a little bit more of a world perspective for my 2025 end-of-year list, so that's another, perk there. But then for this movie here, where I want to start is that I'm not overly versed in Japanese cinema. So I'm a big fan of J-horror that came out in the 2000s and beyond. I've seen some of the earlier works and stuff, but we get elements of that here, of like the J-horror movement. This does seem to be more influenced by Western horror movies, but I mean by that like United States, Great Britain, stuff like that. But we are still getting elements of that technology that has been utilized in different films from this country, like Ringu, One Missed Call, or Pulse. There is a piece of commentary here that fits with the current state of teens that also makes sense. I think this sets the stage for what I want to develop from there. So now that I have that done, let's then jump into this last point here, as I don't have a lot of interaction with younger people outside of like my son, daughter, niece, nephew, as well as the children that would be around them, like when I'm going to pick my kids up from like daycare. So I have seen though things where this younger generation seems to tend to have earbuds in all the time, whether they're actually listening to music, shows, or just kind of doing this to avoid contact. So there is a good reason in this film though. The only way that you can hear this entity is through a smartphone that is connected to the earpiece. That adds the tension here where Elena's mother or the teacher tries to tell them to take it out, whether it's her or another student. And let me go ahead and just say, Elena is portrayed by Sierra, and then we have the other student is Nyan Ito, portrayed by Hirasawa. So both of them, there's a level of respect here by taking these out, but since we're in a horror film, it could also get them killed, so it's an interesting element here to build tension. So let's then shift slightly and bring more about this technology. Cell phones have been used in J-horror previously. I know that the later Ringu films incorporated it, especially since they can, show videos. One Missed Call utilized it through voicemails. I'm not fully sure if it has to be a smartphone, but everybody in this day and age has one. I don't have anything to refute it because of that. So it makes an interesting element because Elena's mother is upset for her always being on her phone. And I mean, this is obviously something that is kind of utilized and kind of looked at in society just in general. So the mother tries to take the phone from her and the screen gets cracked. This is adding to the tension that it could spell doom for her daughter. Her mother doesn't know though. Even if she did, she probably wouldn't believe her because that's a classic movie trope and of not believing and putting your child even in more peril. Let's then discuss the entity a bit more here. Elena sees this figure in a nightmare. There is this idea though that it's not a dream. It's just a darker reality. I do like playing with this since it makes the characters question their sanity. Now, since Nyan disappears, whatever is haunting her assumes her as the person to come after next. When we finally see it, it looks like a mummy. It has bandages covering its face. There is something that we see later that is subtle, and I thought that was an interesting reveal. What I like here is that this kind of feels closer to like the entity that we saw in It Follows. The only difference is it's not always following that person. Like, it's not where it feels like if you run in one direction, turn and ran the other way, it would change directions. This one can appear closer to you. It helps to build tension, which adds to my enjoyment. Now, with the last theme here to delve more into would be identity. Elena is struggling because she is bullied for being half Japanese, half British. She was self-harming, so her mother was moving her to a new school. There's something that comes up regularly for immigrants in the United States, wanting to keep your heritage while also assimilating into a new culture. This draws air from both sides, where you're not living and from where you're from. I do love that Elena befriends Akiri, who is portrayed by Akuno, who wants to know more about Great Britain or anything that she knows about that side. She thinks that it makes her more interesting. Now, Kiri has a different issue. Being in high school like she is, she worries about what everybody thinks, which creates issues in itself, and this causes friction between the two, which also contributes to her not believing her friend. Now, where I think I'll end up going would be the acting performances. Starting out with our lead, I do think that Sierra plays this role well. I don't want to presume, but it does appear that she is an actor who is of both Japanese and British birth. That could potentially give her an interesting insight to bring to the role from just personal experiences. Now, she plays Elena stoically, but I also see people, I can see people not liking that, but it conveys to me somebody dealing with depression and not necessarily fitting in, and I do like that, being able to convey it with body language. I like Akuno as her friend. She seems like she truly wants to help and be there, but there are elements where Elena gets hurt. Hirasawa is also interesting as this bullied girl who is driven to a meltdown. What I like is that Nyan sets the stage for what Elena then starts going through, so we actually see a mirror between these two characters. Other than that, the rest of the cast were good to push her characters where they end up. Also, then it'd be filmmaking. Thought the cinematography and framing were good. They do interesting things there with making almost like surreal sequences that seem like they could be from a nightmare. It could also be a darker due to the entity. I like how they use the whole frame in long shots. That just makes this figure that is watching our character creepier. This falls in line with a fear that I have. It also seems like Elena and Nuan can see it. It takes things happening to Akiri as well. There's some good things with the sound design as well. This is where it shines. I love that when Elena is wearing earbuds, the sound is muffled. This is giving more perspective to what she's hearing, so when people are trying to talk to her, she can't fully hear them. That adds to the atmosphere, and I appreciate it, as I think overall this is well made. So in conclusion, I think this is a film that is posed as a modern J-horror film. There is more under the surface that I appreciated. I like seeing that we're getting this like updated technology being used in a story where our lead character, Elena, feels like she is being pursued by an entity. I also like the themes of identity and fitting in, plus the effects of bullying. This is well made with the sound design, cinematography, framing, and the look of the entity. I do like that the outcome of the film, where they're going with it is what I'm saying. This last scene image, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm trying to tread lightly there. But now that I can recommend to everybody, if you like horror films from Japan, give this a go. To me, it feels like a different variation on the J horror films of the 2000s, kind of getting a little moderate update and twist. So my rating here for The Invisible Half is going to be an 8 out of 10. And then for my last feature that I'm going to be doing a review here for is going to be Dark Match. This is from 2024. This is written and directed by Lal Dean. It stars Aisha Issa, Stephen Ogg, and Mo Aiden. This is a supernatural horror action film that is from Canada. It is currently sitting on a 5.4 on IMDb and a 2.7 on Letterboxd, or synopsis being a small-time wrestling company accepts a well-paying gig in the backwoods town only to learn too late that the community is run by a mysterious cult leader with devious plans for their match. So let me go ahead and just kind of give you, actually, first, before I do that, if you'd like to hear a featured review, this is going to be episode 280. That was St. Patrick's Day number 6 that I had this paired up with Leprechaun Origins. Kind of made for an interesting thing because there's kind of little different rituals and everything that go on with, different types of creatures here and everything like that. Doesn't make for the greatest double feature, but I digress. So some of the people I just want to kind of give a quick introduction here is going to be our main character is Misbehave. She is portrayed by Issa. She is this, a woman wrestler. She wants a shot at the title. Her boss of Rusty, portrayed by Jonathan Cherry, is pretty much letting her know that's not going to happen. Now, Misbehave is seeing Mean Jolene, portrayed by Ogg. He is a guy who's been in this federation for a little bit of while here. And then Misbehave has an issue with her last match with Kate the Great, portrayed by Canning. That'd be Sarah Canning. And then there's also this character of the leader. Now, he originally went by the Prophet when he used to wrestle in the same organization with Mean Jolene. They had an epic kind of go-around. The leader now is going by that name. He's portrayed by Chris Jericho. He's kind of went off the deep end and has created this own little cult here. So what I'll say here is we lace up our boots to step back into the squared circle with Dean's 2024 horror film Dark Match. This isn't your average wrestling show. A small-time indie company takes a gig in the backwoods town only to find themselves grappling with a sinister cult leader and his deadly plans. So we have some brutal practical effects here. That's one of my favorite parts here. All of the wrestling matches for this dark show is they have different elements, like it's wind, water, fire, and then there's a special fifth one in there. I'm missing one. Earth is the other one. We have a chilling atmosphere here, and I'll say this time around, I actually think that the atmosphere held up better than I remembered it. It does actually feel like you're kind of watching a dark match where it's not as loud because you don't have as many people in the arena type thing. There's some clever twists on the wrestling conventions here, actually making it more realistic, where the moves are actually people are actually hitting each other and they're actually trying to kill, because there is a reason here, and it could end up being a dark ritual, or maybe there's not. I do like how they start playing with these conventions. There is some at the end I do feel a little bit tacked on, and they don't necessarily fully work. But if you're a wrestling fan and a horror fan, this is a hybrid that I think delivers a knockout blow or gets pinned for the count. I think it's pretty good. I think it actually works fairly well here. And my rating really kind of just stayed the same on this one, as I'm coming in after both times as a 7 out of 10. And this could be a back-end contender for my top 25 list. And if you are curious, this is still on Shudder. My last little mini review here is going to be another episode 3 here of Horror's Greatest. This is on Japanese horror. So for this one here, it is featuring Tavernervry Du, Kate Siegel, and David Dastmalchian. So this one is veering between slow dread and shocking violence. The wild world of Japanese horror is something for everybody. From Ugetsu to Ring, Onibaba to Audition, Tetsuo to Battle Royale, the greatest J-horror films are essential viewing. So this one I really love here is that they break it up kind of almost in 3 different sections. So we're going to the past, talking about the early classics that are available. Since I've been doing a lot of research on ones from the 20s and 30s and 40s and everything, those ones end up getting lost due to natural disasters like the Great Kanto earthquake, as well as World War II. But there are ones that have survived, like Onibaba and Kwaidan, which are great films. But it also goes into a top 5 that weren't covered in that era that definitely had some ones that I've added to my list, and some of them I've already seen already. And then, like I said, it kind of goes into more of the J-horror boom from there. So we have a great group of people here that have such insights into the different eras that are covering, which is great. That includes experts and journalists like Du, Todd Kushigamaki. If I mispronounce any of these names, I do apologize. We also have Akira Mitsuo Lebit. Nicholas Ruka, Michael Gringold, Leah Anderson, Rebecca McKendry, and Nathaniel Thompson. Plus, we get filmmakers and actors like Joe Bagos, Kate Siegel, like I said, Das Malchian, Alex Winter, Ernest R. Dickerson, and Ryuhei Kitamura. So just hearing these people that were influenced by what they do, or like the case of Kitamura actually making a film in the air, because I believe he directed Versus, it helps kind of make sense of the different things that I've noticed. So I do love that they give like different lists throughout the episode, whether it's, to figure out lesser known films, what they're referring to, or just ones that you really kind of see what the topic that they're talking about. Being that these are well made, this gives a good overview of the topic, which I'm a big fan of. So this is, like I said, covering Japanese horror here and kind of just different things there. So once again, I'm giving this one a 8 out of 10, the highest rating that I can give for a documentary. So I'm going to go ahead and do here then is get you over to a very brief break before I get into the main event here of my top horror films from 1925.
I'm Dean. I'm the dad.
I'm Laura. I'm the mom.
And I'm Arthur. I'm the son.
And together we are...
Family Plot.
Plot Podcast is the best history podcast that we can make.
Like intellectual pancakes for the soul.
I've been called the cool dad you want to take a road trip with and learn about history from.
One of our listeners said, listen to me was like Mom reading you a bedtime story full of cool history, and I am here for it.
And one of our reviewers called me the snarky brother they wish they had.
So join us to learn some cool stuff,
to hear some fun banter and wild tangents.
And we are unabashedly LGBTQ friendly and trans positive and supportive.
And remember,
when you listen, you're our
family.
So join us and occasionally some very cool guests
for the Family Plot Podcast.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
And welcome to the main event here. So let me preface here. So I was able to find all of the horror films that I could for 1925, and this is actually the first time that I'm going to go ahead and just that I'm going to actually run through just those ones by themselves instead of incorporating in another year. I usually would do like the year in the threes. But so what I'm going to go ahead and do, we're going to do some stats here for all of the horror films that I was able to find between IMDb and Letterboxd. So there's 12. About, if you watched everything, it'd be like 18.6 hours. There's 14 directors that worked on these 12 films from 5 countries, so the title screen should be in about 5 different languages as well. So the top secondary genres here are going to be drama, fantasy, thriller, comedy. And that's going to be 6, and then everything else had 2 films. Now, the United States had 4 horror films produced. India had 2, Japan had 2, USSR had 2. And then some of the title screens are going to be in Hindi, Japanese, and English, or kind of the different languages. There are no themes and nano-genres across this year. Only Lon Chaney is the only person to have more than 1 horror film, as he was in 2. And then there wasn't any studios that did more than 1. So then, here's some of the highs and lows that we did from this year. Highest average is going to go to the Phantom of the Opera, and that's the most popular. Now, the lowest average and the newest is going to be Wolf Blood, that came out on December 16th of 1925. Now, the most obscure is Black Serpent. I think this is one's from India. Then the oldest is Shin Yatsua Kaidan. Now, this one is supposedly coming out on January 1. I'm assuming somebody just kind of put that day in, so there's no confirmation there. The longest is one of the Lost films of 10 days. That was at 150 minutes, and the shortest is going to be on this one of The Bear's Wedding at 60 minutes. And then some other countries here. Italy had a horror film produced, and yeah, I think that's the only other country that we can include here. So let me run through these Lost films then, as there are going to be 5 of these. Now, the first one is going to be Ghost Story of Yatsua, which is Yatsua Kaiden. Now, this is directed by Norio Yamagami, and I did quite a bit of research to kind of find this. There's a little bit more I want to do here at some point, but I don't have. I'll get it. I'm not going to get into why, but that's what I'll just leave that there. But writers here are Nanboku Tsuraya, and then Yamagami also helped write this. Now, it stars Kimiko Hara, Kan Ishii, and Koichi Kazumi, and this is from Japan. So this is a telling of the classic ghost story that is featuring Awa, and I believe this is the person who's the head of this manor of Tamiya Iman. So this originated as a kabuki play and was written in about 1825. Deals with themes of betrayal, murder, and supernatural revenge of a wronged woman. And then the next one's going to be 10 Days. This was directed by Duke Warren. This was written by Arthur Orrell. And then this is starring Ashton Deerholt, Hazel Keener and Victor Potel. This from the United States. Now, this one, the synopsis is wealthy speeder Dick Van Buren, who's portrayed by Deerholt, gets 10 days in jail, opts to be a lifeguard, and rescues a mysterious woman he falls for, who turns out to be a famous actress amidst a publicity campaign. So that's about the extent of the information I could find there. Then the next one up is going to be New Ghost Story of Yatsua. This one goes by the original title of Shin Yatsua Kaiden. Now, this one is directed by Yoshiro Idemasa, and then this is starring Mitsushiro Toyoma, and then this is from Japan. It looks to be a similar story to as a different studio did Ghost Story of Yatsua. This one being from the studio of Shochiku, I think it might be how you say that. And I'll actually go ahead and say here that a lot of these ones were lost in like earthquakes and as well as the bombings during World War II. It's kind of a bummer that a lot of these Japanese ones have turned out to be lost, and the United States ones, they tended to be during fires or just not taking care of the prints and stuff like that, just kind of and the last two are from India, and the first one being Wife and the Vampire. This is directed by Latari Vas, and there's not much information outside of that. And then the other one is Black Serpent, that was directed by Bhanguwati Prasad Mishra, and then this was starring Jillo. I think that might be how you say that person's name. So I know this is very short here. There's not a lot of information on these ones because people just didn't keep records or anything like that. So I wish I could go into more other than what I've just kind of given you here, but still kind of interesting stuff here. I wanted to give what information I have found when I was doing my research and everything like that. Also, the big thing here is just, especially these foreign films, it would be a pleasure to actually watch, just kind of see a different way they were doing things, or just kind of how the times were, especially from these other countries. It just kind of gives you a interesting look at the history of cinema, and even more so when you're in even earlier from the United States or from these other countries. So I did want to also kind of include that even if it's not one that's high on my list of wanting to check out, I do wish it was still available in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to go ahead and do, this has been the opening thing here. I will go ahead and get you over to a break, and I'm going to jump back in here for my top 7 horror films from 1925.
Hey, I'm Jill, the host of the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. Every other week, I feature a true crime book by one of my favorite authors, telling you the story with respect for the victims and loved ones. But I don't stop there. A psychology educator who's also studied serial killers, I analyze the cases and I endeavor to explain the whys. Why do people do this? Told in trilogies, Part 3 is dubbed Second Cast, where I cast a wider net going into some surprising, bone-chilling directions. Cold cases, homicides, missing persons, serial killers, and stories from history. These both fascinate and appall us. This is a true crime book club, so read with me or let me read for you. Join the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast and see what I'm pulling off the murder shelf next.
And then here we go. I'm going to get into these top 7, but first I'm actually going to do the stats of the ones that I was able to actually watch. So there are 7 films here. This is about 10.1 hours worth of watching. There are 9 directors, 3 countries, and 3 languages for the title screens. And then it looks like the secondary genres here are going to be drama at 5, fantasy at 2. The United States is leading the way here with 4 films, with the USSR having 2. And then just kind of looking through here, some of the other stuff. There are no themes or nano-genres or anything like that. Lon Chaney does appear in 2 of these films. No reoccurring studios, but that should make sense here. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and just kind of give these stats here. The highest average according to people across the board, the most popular is once again going to be the Phantom of the Opera. Wolf Blood's going to be the lowest average as well as the newest. And then the oldest as well as the shortest is going to be The Bear's Wedding. And the longest, I actually should have said this, for the Phantom of the Opera is also going to be the longest at 107 minutes. And the most obscure is going to be the case of Taro Mekaladavzi, or the case of the murder of Taro Mekaladavzi. I don't know if I said it that way or not. And then it looks like we have just a couple countries here that are going to be included, and that's also Italy has a film on this list here. But let's go ahead and jump into that list here, and it's actually going to start with the case of the murder of Taro Mekaladavzi. Now, the original title here is Taro Mekaladavzi Mekalobis Saquim. This is directed by Ivan Petrostani, and it was written by Selva Dindani, and this stars Koti Mika Bredavzi, Nato Vakadanzi, and Mikhail Kandadagazi. So if I'm mispronouncing any of those names, I do apologize there. I'll actually go ahead and say here is that I believe this one would be a film that would be from Georgia if it wasn't part of the Soviet Union at the time. The synopsis: school teacher Spiridon and his pretty wife Despin are taking a room in a small inn. Tero Mekaladavzi, a local nobleman in debauchee, falls for the beauty of Despain. He and his friends terrify the young couple to get to her, and Spiridon is portrayed by Mika Berendezi, and then Despin by Vakanandanzi, and then Terrell is going to be played by Kada Dadsky. And then the average ratings here on IMDb is going to be a 6.1, and then for Letterboxd is going to be probably about a 3 to a 3.5 star movie over there. And what I'll go ahead and just kind of say is that if you'd like to hear a full review of this one, it'll be over on episode 292, which was Centennial Club number 21. I had this paired up with The Surrender. And what I'll just kind of give you here as my blurb is that this is an early courtroom drama and offers a fascinating character study. While the Prince condition that I saw on YouTube wasn't in the greatest, and the lack of a sync soundtrack did hinder my viewing of this copy, but this has some grounded performances and subtle eerie effects make it a unique dive into cinematic history, especially because this is from the Soviet Union / Georgia. Kind of getting to see what they were producing in films over there during this era here of 1925. But despite its age, it still has some interesting stuff that you can kind of discuss and everything like that. So I have this one here as my lowest rated film for this one, and I have it as a 6 out of 10. And then coming in position number 6, I have Wolfblood. This is directed by George Chesbrough and Bruce Mitchell. It was written by Bennett Cohen, and then this stars Chesbrough, Roy Watson, and Milburn Moranti. This one is from the United States. It's considered a body horror, adventure, drama, romance, western film, and it's sitting on a 5.4 on IMDb, and it looks like, I would say, between a 2 and a 3-star movie over on Letterboxd, with synopsis being, after Wolfblood transfusion, a man thinks that he is becoming a wolf. So this is one I got to see on Tubi, and it's captivating tale here of a man who thinks he's being transformed into a wolf because he gets into a tiff with another company here. He's left for dead, and then a blood transfusion, like I was saying. So we're kind of getting an early type werewolf film, but it's not necessarily in the most case here, but it's kind of like a nature versus nurture idea, and maybe the beast within. We don't necessarily know if he's kind of driven himself mad. Is there self-fulfilling prophecies here? So obviously a lack of dialogue since we are watching this, and it might be a challenge for some people. The powerful visual storytelling and the performance of our lead actor actually make this a very memorable cinematic experience. And kind of give who that would be here is Dick Bannister, who is portrayed by Chesbrough. So I mean, he's kind of given himself there. So this one, I didn't love it. I do think there's some good things here, and I mean, being how early into cinema and this type of take on being a werewolf film, if you'd like to hear more of a review for this one, I have that over at episode 281, which was Centennial Club number 19, where I had this paired up with Control Freak. Doesn't make for the greatest double feature, but, kind of just some interesting things that I delve into it there. So this one, though, I have as, the next on this list. I have Wolfblood as a 6 out of 10 as well. And let's jump into that top 5 here, and the first one's going to be The Monster. This is one that is directed by Roland West, and then he also wrote this with Crane Wilbur, Willard Mack, and Albert Kenyon. This is starring Lon Chaney, Gertrude Olmsted, and Hallam Cooley. This is a comedy, mystery, romance, sci-fi film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 6.2 on IMDb, and not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 3-star movie over there, with our synopsis being a meek clerk who doubles as an amateur detective, investigates strange going-ons at a remote mental sanitarium. So this one here, if you'd like to hear a featured review, is going to be episode 278, which was Centennial Club number 17. Had this paired up with The Monkey. Not the greatest double feature here, but we are dealing with kind of people being driven mad by different things and, not necessarily what they are or, type of thing like that. But this one here, I would actually say is horror comedy that features the iconic Lon Chaney, the first of the times he'll appear on this list. But this is an early mad scientist and old dark house film that offers a unique blend of suspense and humor. While Chaney's signature makeup isn't a focal point, his menacing portrayal of Dr. Zika and then Johnny Arthur's bumbling detective creates a delightful dynamic there. Despite a few minor plot issues, this has a theatrical staging unsettling asylum one as well, setting that is, and that's kind of cool to see this early. And I like the soundtrack that was synced with it, as it makes for, I would recommend to silent film enthusiasts, and if you're trying to watch all of the Lon Chaney films that are still available, I think this is one that you want to kind of check out here. So I actually gave this cinematic oddity here it's going to be quite a bit of a bump up in rating here, as I gave this, The Monster, a 7 out of 10. And then coming in at number 4, we're going to Italy here for Maciste in Hell. This goes by the original title of Maciste alla Inferno. This is directed by Guido Briganoni, and it was written between Riccardo Artufuo, Stefano Pittaluga, and then given some credit here to Dante Alighieri. This stars Bartholomew Pagano, Umberto Guaracino, and Mario Saio. And actually say Pagano here took on this role of Maciste because this is a good handful of movies that we were already into this series before he took on, or before this film actually came about. But this one is an action drama fantasy along with being a horror film, as I said, from Italy, sitting on a 6.8 on IMDb and a 3.5 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis here being: the devil takes Maciste down to hell in the attempt to corrupt and ruin his mortality. So this one, if you'd like to hear a featured review, is going to be episode 279, which was Centennial Club number 18. Had this paired up with The Dead Thing. Doesn't make the greatest double feature, but I mean, we are kind of dealing with trying to make sure we do things the right way before things kind of fall apart on you, so that's what I'm going to run with there. But this one is we descend into Briganoni's spectacle of Maciste in Hell as our lead character goes down to the underworld. Now, Pagano was a legendary strongman, and this plunges him into a war for control of the underworld, which I love that part there. We actually have like Pluto, and then there's just like Luciferina. There's just different types of people here, and we actually see that hell might have its own hierarchy. So that's what really kind of does there. But this also borrows heavily from Dante's Divine Comedy, and then we also have illustrations by Gustave Doré get factored in here as well. I actually believe they even take the giant Lucifer that was from the early version of Dante's Inferno, and those scenes kind of get incorporated in as well. So I was really kind of impressed by the visionary set design here. It blends German expressionism with nightmarish aesthetics to bring hell to life. Despite the age of this one and the innovative techniques and the cool demon designs, make for a hidden gem for horror history buffs. I mean, I'll say once again, bringing hell to life in this movie is quite impressive, especially because this is over 100 years old. So I would actually go ahead and say give this one a watch, especially if you're a fan of Italian cinema. This is kind of a fun thing to kind of check out, as it's not super long, so it also kind of helps out there. But for Maciste in Hell, I gave this one a 7 out of 10 as well. And as we start off that top 3 here, it's going to go to the first movie on this list that I've actually seen more than once. That's going to be The Lost World. This is directed by Harry O. Hoyt. This was written by Marion Fairfax, and it's also being inspired by the source material by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who I actually believe he actually appears in this movie at one point, if I remember correctly. So it stars Bessie Love, Lewis Stone, and Wallace Beery. This is a dinosaur adventure, jungle adventure, quest, adventure, fantasy, romance, sci-fi thriller that is also a horror film, and this one I believe is coming from the United States. This is currently sitting on a 6.9 on IMDb. Nice. And I would say between like a 3 and a 3.5 star movie over on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being: a group of explorers travel to a plateau where prehistoric creatures still roam. So the first time I actually saw this one, I go into this on the episode that I covered it originally for the podcast. That's going to be episode 293. Voyage to the Fives, number 10. This was a mini review over there because, like I said, I watched this one in college, and my mother actually had a disc set that had a bunch of just kind of sci-fi and like horror films in it. So I decided to go ahead and give this one a watch. And then I realized that it's now listed in the horror genre, so I wanted to give it a second go around here. And this is just an epic silent film. Predates King Kong. Its cinematic marvel showcases the groundbreaking stop-motion animation of Willis H. O'Brien, who brings the dinosaurs like a pterodactyl and brontosaurus to life in this Amazonian plateau. I do love the concept here, where I almost wonder if something like this could exist, because there is so much of the world that hasn't been explored. So could there be an isolated place where the temperatures and everything are just right? I should also say here that O'Brien would end up going on to work on King Kong, so this is kind of early work that he was doing. Kind of taught himself. He saw what worked, what didn't work. This one's a little bit rougher around the edges, where King Kong is way smoother, but the pacing might occasionally falter, and there is a little bit of lack of character development. Kind of takes a backseat in the spectacle, but this film is charmingly clunky effects and impressive sets, and the captivating concept of a hidden prehistoric ecosystem make it a must-see for silent film aficionados and monster movie enthusiasts. Because like I said, there's just so much history in what went into this one, and yeah, it doesn't hold up as well to things we see nowadays, but it's still a interesting thing. So for me though, this one's going to stay at a very similar rating, as I have this once again at a 7 out of 10 as we kick off that top 3 of my horror films from 1925. And then the film coming up here for my runner-up position is going to be The Bear's Wedding. This is directed between Konstantin Eggert and Vladimir Garden. Now, this was written by Gregory Grebner, and this is also based on a novel called Loki's that I believe was done let me make sure I get his name correct, as he actually listed on here, is Prosper Marimy. And then I know Anatoly Lukacharsky also helped write this. I believe they might have done like a play adaptations, and then that was adapted into this feature film. So this stars Konstantin Eggert, Alexandra Kartseva, and Yuri Savadatsky. This is... Actually, let me make sure I do this here. This is a drama horror film that is from the Soviet Union. I think this one would actually technically be from Lithuania. The original title is Medasva Zavadba. Now, this is sitting on a 6.2 on IMDb, and I would say about a 3.5 over on Letterboxd, with that synopsis being: Lithuania, first half of the 19th century, while hunting on the outskirts of the ancient castle of Count Mikhail Shemet, a bear attacks the countess. She loses her mind, and her son Casimir acquires a pathology. Might drive him a little bit insane. We don't necessarily know. So I will say here that the Count Mikhail is portrayed by Eggert, and then the son is also portrayed by Eggert, and then the Count is Adelina, and she is portrayed by Kartseva. So this one, if you'd like to hear feature review, is going to be episode 291. That was Centennial Club number 20. I had this paired up with Frawaka, and this actually made for an interesting double feature here, as we were dealing with like folk horror and like folklore and stuff like that. So I thought that actually paired up pretty nicely there. So this Soviet silent film is captivating as it's a historical drama, and it's based on folklore, as I was saying, adapted from a play, and it explores the themes of like self-fulfilling prophecies, ancestral curses, and the descent into madness, all set against the backdrop of a decaying Lithuanian castle. So while the film's silent nature and potential needed, for the subtitle translation, which I had to actually do with my phone, there's a bit more here than I was expecting. We have an atmospheric gothic horror elements, impressive makeup, especially for the titular bear, as actually played by Nikolay Tromov, and if anything, I thought it was actually a real bear, so that's actually impressive. And I actually thought the soundtrack that was synced with it were quite effective. It helps to elevate the experience. So Eggert delivers a strong dual performance here as both Count Mikhail and the afflicted son Casimir. So for me, now, this is not going to be for the casual viewer. This is a fascinating historical deep dive, especially if you're interested not only in this era of filmmaking, but if you want to kind of delve into the Soviet Union. And the evolution of horror here is kind of interesting as well. So this one actually have a bump up in rating, as I gave The Bear's Wedding a 7.5 out of 10. And if you couldn't tell what was going to come in at number 1 here for me, it is going to be The Phantom of the Opera. This is directed by Rupert Julian. So the writer here is giving credit to Gaston Leroux. Now, he wrote the original novel that this is based from, and there's a handful of other writers here that I want to make sure I kind of get, is that actually his novel's from 1910, if you were curious. And then it looks like the titles were uncreditedly done by Walter Anthony and Tom Reed. Now, the adaptation was done by Elliot J. Clausen, as well as Raymond L. Chirac. And then the treatment was done by Bernard McConville. And there's another writer here of Frank M. McCormick. And there's additional comedy material done by Richard Wallace. And then the treatment was also done by Jasper Spearing. This features the incomparable Lon Chaney, and then there's also Mary Philbin and Norman Carey. This is a tragedy horror music film that is from the United States. I believe this is actually an early Universal production. Yes, it is. And a mad, disfigured composer seeks to love with a lovely young opera singer is our synopsis. Currently sitting on a 7.5 on IMDb and a 3.7 on Letterboxd. And then if you'd like to hear a mini review, this one was on episode 270, which was New Year in movie number 19. This one paired The Fourth Victim up with The Damned, which is a 2025 film. It did festival rounds last year, everything like that. But, I'll digress there. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more, I would direct you over to that one. But I'll say here in this little blurb that I'm going to be doing is that this truly showcases the enduring power of LaRue's tale. I mean, this one I've actually seen adapted on the stage in London. I've seen a handful of different adaptations of this one. So we dive into this relevant commentary on toxic masculinity through Chaney's tragic yet terrifying portrayal of the disfigured Phantom. I remember what his name was offhand, but I can't just let me see if I can actually, I have my review here pulled up and see if I can quickly figure out what I think his name is like Eric. I think that might be the name that is actually his true name here. It's also kind of fitting that when I was kind of just glancing through my review here, that they are doing Faust yes, Eric the Phantom is his name, but they're doing Faust as the play that they're adapting in this version of it, which I thought was kind of a cool thing there. I'll actually come back to that here in just a second. But from the grand imposing sets of the Paris Opera House to the treacherous, eerie catacombs below, the cinematography perfectly captures the film's oppressive atmosphere, laying groundwork for future old dark house films. While early filmmaking techniques are evident, Chaney's self-designed iconic makeup remains a powerful visual, and the performances, though silent, are impactful. I'll actually discuss here just very briefly the meta-narrative of Faust within the opera adds another layer of intrigue here, because this is somebody who, our main actress here, who is trying to take over Christine, and in this version she is portrayed by Philbin. It's kind of interesting that she wants to become the lead in this one, where Carlotta is the one who is the main actress at the moment. And she's actually portrayed by Mary Fabian. It's kind of interesting that Christine has to decide if she is going to, sell herself to this mysterious phantom who has been helping train her and everything, and how much is she owed to the phantom, and how much is just natural talent that is now coming out. So I think this is a must-see for silent film enthusiasts, horror history buffs as well, and anyone fascinated by the enduring legacy of the classic story. I would say that this is actually a foundational piece of cinema as it continues to resonate a century later. So for me, another bump up in rating. It's still hard how early we are to kind of go much higher than this, but I actually gave this version of The Phantom a 8, and that's going to be, my number one film here from 1925. Out of 7 of them, there's not a lot to work with, but I still think this is a pretty strong year this early into filmmaking. So what are your thoughts? How many of these have you seen? Would you reorder these in any way if you have seen more than just kind of one of these? If you have a way or want to get in touch with me about anything like that, go ahead and just shoot me a line. That'll be here in the outro here shortly, so just stay tuned and figure out how you can get a hold of me if you'd like to. But I'm going to go ahead and do those, get you over to one last break before I close out this show. I have a great thing here that I wanted to go ahead and give you an offer for, since it fell into my lap, and wanted to go ahead and share it with you. I have been given a promo code here for shimmerwoodbeverages.com. These are CBD infused seltzers that are award winning. They have been twice recognized by Forbes as the #1 CBD beverage in the United States and the best lower potency option out there. It blends full spectrum CBD with local Maine fruits and cocktail bitters for bold flavors, crafted without added sugars, caffeine, or artificial ingredients, which, if you know me, that is something that I prefer, because I get enough of the caffeine and I'm trying to get away from sugars. So it's designed for relaxation without intoxicating effects, perfect straight from the can, or a refreshing cocktail or mocktail base, depending on what you're looking for there. This has unique flavors like raz lime, chai cherry, ginger orange, and just hemp. Now, Simmerwood offers a health-conscious alternative to sugary sodas or alcohol, made to revive a calm, clear focus for natural stress relief. Each can contains 5 milligrams of full-spectrum CBD for a balancing, calming effect. So this one here is at, like I said, shimmerwood.com, and my promo code here for you listeners is actually, you get 30% off of if you use my code, and this is, like I said, a great deal if you can go ahead and you want to do that, and my code is going to be Cinephile1. So if you want to check out more of the information or check out their site, there will be links in the show notes for you to check that out there.
Welcome to Camp Cringe, streaming on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
The school bus arrives at Camp Sawiki Wiki for its annual summer camp.
What the hell is your problem, lady? Do you need something, or are you just trying to ruin my vibe?
My name is Tony. Are you hurt?
You kids shouldn't be out here playing with fire.
Does anyone else see that creepy lady following Nevea? Or is it just me?
Yo, what is that noise?
Remember, God is watching.
Welcome to Camp Cringe, man. We're so screwed.
New episodes every 25th of the month.
And welcome back one last time here, and just to kind of go through my social medias and stuff, if you'd like to send me an email, you can send that at journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. You can send me any sort of feedback, or if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and shoot them there, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Or if you want to send me any screener links or anything like that, anything podcast related, you can send it via that way. If you'd like to read any of the written reviews, I'll direct you to Reviews of the Dead, and that's horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to become friends with me on Facebook, I'm David Michigan Garrett Jr. On Twitter, I'm Buckeye from Mish. Letterboxd, I'm David OSU. On Instagram, I'm David OSU87. On Threads, I'm David OSU87. And then Journey with a Cinephile has its own Instagram at Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. Now, all of these ones I will be sharing like my ratings on, whatnot. I know for Letterboxd, all of the reviews are going to be for horror and non-horror alike. Instagram, I will be sharing over there is my different like posters and everything for things that I'm reviewing. My personal account, you might see some personal pictures every now and then if I can remember to take them. And then, you know, kind of same thing for Threads. And then Journey with a Cinephile is going to be more of just kind of posting podcast-related different stuff over there. And I'll also direct you to the Nightclub Discord channel, as I have a little section over there where we have some good conversations. I post all of my reviews and any new podcast episodes or some of the things I'm watching when I actually have time to post that. So keep an eye out over there, and I'll have the link for that and everything else in the show notes there. And then I'm also going to direct you, a way that you can actually listen to the show is going to be through the Pod Nation TV. This is a streaming service and everything like that. There will be a link in the blog posts for all of my episodes, so if you'd like to listen to it that way. It's kind of a cool little thing. You can definitely do that through like Roku TV, and there's some other apps for it as well, just as another way for you to consume this podcast if you decide to. There's also a lot of other great shows that are on that network as well. And for my next episode, I'm going to get back on doing these Voyage of the Fives. I'm going to be doing this for episode 296, where I'm going to be pairing up here is The Ghost Goes West. This is from 1935. Not necessarily a horror film. Does have some horror elements, but that'll be one of the featured reviews. I'm going to be pairing up with Final Destination Bloodlines. This has now come to VOD, so I'm going to check that one out. Those will be the two featured reviews. And then my Voyage of the Fives rewatch is going to be Species. This is from 1995, so that'll be given a watch there. And then on my 2025 rewatch is also going to be Uncontained. I'm going to check that one out on Screambox. As I've already watched it once, going to give it just another go. And then I have more screeners and stuff that I'll be watching for you there. I'm not necessarily sure how much. And my goal is actually to go to the Gateway Film Center to watch Day of the Dead. This is going to be the first time I've ever seen it on the big screen, so hopefully things line up there so I can go check that out. And I don't think there's anything else I need to say here outside of... That wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending